Pharmaceutical Processing, in conjunction with Interfex 2018, presents Interfex Live.
Good friend of mine, Joe McGinnis, ex-FDA, J&J, sat across the table from him more than once, so yeah, okay. So he asks the hard questions. We have Anthony, who's been down the road many times, and my colleague from IPS, and that would be Mark. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through a few things like, the title is What's New, What's Different, and we'll take it from there. So you can rest assured, as you've seen in the last conference, we're gonna move quite a bit around. And what I would say is, if you got a burning question you wanna ask, raise your hand, all right? Otherwise, we're gonna save everything for the end. If the question does get asked and it looks like it's gonna get us off track, I reserve the right to shut you down and we move on, all right? Nothing bad, nothing good, but don't take it personal, but so what? Okay, so every year we start with the same thing. So Joe, what's new, man?
Yeah, and I was anticipating this question, what's new? Let's start with what's the same, right? What's the same? You're still going to get inspected by the FDA. You're still going to go through the same scrutiny. Everybody sees all of the hot items like data integrity and whatnot. This is not going to change. So, taking it from that point of view, you still have to be prepared, and we're going to talk a little bit about that now. But in my experience, just because you're hearing things like for every new regulation, 2 regulations have to be removed, and just because of these other things that you may hear, you're going to be inspected. And the FDA investigators are highly trained, some of them more so than others. And I went through the program. I know what the program is, and I have a lot of respect for the program. And we'll get into a little bit of that as we go along. What has changed? Okay, since the last time we were here, program alignment was implemented in May of 2017. Program alignment means that the agency is now separated programmatically rather than geographically from the old 20 district offices. Now there's 7 programmatic offices. For the Center for Drugs, there's 4 drug district offices in the country. For devices, there's 3 device offices in the country. And what do I mean by that? Let's just take this geographic area. Before, you had the New England District Office, New York District Office, New Jersey District Office, Baltimore District Office, Philadelphia District Office, and Cincinnati District Office. Combine all of them into one, and now you have Drug Division 1. Drug Division 1 is headed up by a woman who used to run the New Jersey District Office, Diana Amador Toro. She is now the Division Director for Drug Division 1. There's 1 Director of Compliance for the entire Drug Division 1. That was a gentleman in Philadelphia. He has since retired on January 1st, and they're going to fill that position soon. For devices, there's only 3 device districts now in the United States. Device Division 1 encompasses the same area that I just mentioned, but it goes out a little bit further. It goes out past Detroit and whatnot. You can get everything that I just said is on the FDA website. I see people taking copious notes. You can get this just by going to fda.gov and go to program alignment, and you'll get all of this information, and you'll see nice maps. If you click on drugs, you'll see the map of the drug divisions and so forth. So that's different. Mutual recognition agreements are different, right? Just in November, there were 8 countries who will, you know what, I wrote it down, Russ. These 8 countries in November 2017, and there were 4 that were just added in March, so we're up to 12 countries. We're talking about Italy, France, Spain, Sweden, Greece, Hungary. They will rely upon information from drug inspections conducted within each other's borders. Rely upon information from drug inspections conducted within each other's borders. Human drugs and biologics, and this includes inspection reports and related information. So keep in mind, and that information is on the FDA website that I just quoted you. You can find it there. That's different, and that's going to be interesting going forward.
Okay, and just so you know, we had Annette Kruger here yesterday, and she had indicated due to Brexit, that has created, if any of you guys want to comment, that has created and yet another complication. All right, I mean, where does it wind? We haven't even figured out where it's going to wind up, right?
Yeah.
Anthony,
yeah,
want to
comment? That's a real problem, because we have in the EU, obviously, as many of you know, there are QPs that actually release the drug within Europe for either for commercial use or for investigational purposes. And those QPs that are now located in the UK are going to have some issues. And some of the vendors that we work with are actually moving their operations into the EU, so that what was being a QP operation from the UK is now going to be transferred to the EU. So, but that's, things are moving pretty quickly, but I think companies need to be aware of the timetable such that they're prepared, because their drugs are not going to be accepted in the EU if not released by a QP.
So, if I'm looking to make a global launch, this is where, in other words, if I'm looking for an EU launch, this is going to hold me up for sure. Is that it or not?
Well, right now it is, but if you're looking in perhaps maybe a 4 or 5 year time horizon, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think the writing is on the wall, and I think the UK, at least from from my intel, that they are moving.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I got it. Yeah, kind of the way Annette kind of structured it was kind of like, it looks almost like a stalemate right now. So, Yahoo. Right? Yeah.
Well, I think the UK is trying to get a deal like Norway. I don't think they're going to get it.
Oh, all right, I got you. All right, good. So, a couple other things. So what we're going to do is, things that struck me, thanks to my panelists up here, that I got some information. One of the things I found particularly interesting, I actually got last night, and we're going to start with that one, Mark. And that was, so I get this warning letter, and it's issued with the statement which says, based upon the nature of the violations we have identified at your firm, we strongly recommend engaging a consultant qualified as set forth in 21 CFR 211-.34 to assist your firm in meeting CGMP requirements. Now, the word consultant kind of jumped off the page at me, and I'm not a regulatory guy, techie, strictly tech, but it's kind of odd that it said consultant. You want to help me out here?
Yeah, so my experience with that is that I think some of the inspections, some of the observations are so basic that it seems like the FDA has lost confidence that the company can really meet GMPs, and needs an outside look to kind of right their ship, or at least open their eyes to some of the things that they haven't been seeing. So I think that's one of the things that you see with the warning letters, and that's in multiple warning letters. Again, the warning letters are posted on the FDA website. You can read them. A lot of them have that clause.
Okay, so not all of them.
Not all of them.
No, I could see the guys at Novartis taking them out in the parking lot for that one. You know what I mean? But just saying. Just saying. Okay. So, what experience have you gone through that have recently and repeatedly been, you have recently or repeatedly been inspected? For example, as a consultant, what's new, what's different? Why don't we start with you? Either way, you can start there.
Yeah, one of the things I'm seeing in aseptic facilities is a lot of requests to have dynamic smoke monitor, or dynamic smoke simulation for airflow simulation using dynamic smoke studies. You just see that more and more and more. It doesn't specify what exactly to study, but they just expect that dynamic visualization has been done.
Is that unusual?
Oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Try it again.
I'll try it again. What I'm seeing a lot in aseptic facilities is requests to do airflow visualization studies using smoke, and not specifically what should you look for, but just an expectation that in normal routine, that you're simulating normal routine operations with with airflow visualization studies and using smoke videotaping and then reviewing the results and making conclusions on those results.
Okay. So Anthony, what new and unusual? What's been repeated? Any?
I haven't been inspected in a while, so I don't know if I can speak on the subject.
Well, that's a good thing, though.
Yeah, yeah, it is. But I will echo Mark's comments because we did have. I did have knowledge of a company that was recently inspected. It was for a biologic, and they too were looking for dynamic smoke studies as well. So that was certainly consistent with what Mark has been saying, but also data integrity. Data integrity is huge. Mm-hmm. The agency is looking at companies that have data integrity policies and procedures. They're also looking to see if companies have actually undergone a self-inspection or even with a third party. So to have a consultant come in and actually do a data assessment and evaluate whether or not the data that you're collecting is truly maintained and is certainly restricted as well. And I'm not only talking about laboratory data. I'm talking about all data, batch records, investigation reports. So we talk about data integrity. Immediately we think about the laboratory data, but it goes beyond laboratory data.
Absolutely. There was a horror story. I don't know if anybody was able to listen to that last conference we had. I'm going all my clients, and we're having all the thermostats ripped out. So that's the end of that. Turns out, I don't know if you heard the story. Somebody hacked into their data system through their thermostat. Kind of scary when you think about it. The Internet of all things, right? Okay. So anyway, clearly based on this, Joe, these investigators, they got to be a lot different than they. I mean, what are we arming these guys with?
Well, there's administrative actions that the agency can take, and then there's judicial actions, right? Judicial seizure or injunction, administrative actions, a regulatory meeting, untitled letter, warning letter, where the warning letters have the recommendation that a consultant should be enlisted. That's normal language in a consent decree, right? Get somebody to help you with your deficiencies. You have this amount of time to have that expert certify, your processes, and then, for a warning letter, for that to be in a warning letter, usually it's egregious issues at that facility. Early on, if it's the first inspection of a facility, we would call the facility in for a regulatory meeting and speak with them and, tell them, the path that they're on is not a good one, and they need to, come into compliance in the areas that we've looked at. And usually that will lead them to hiring a consultant if they need it to. If they don't take that advice and the next time an investigator goes out, then they'll get either an untitled letter or a warning letter. In my experience, in order to go from a warning letter to a judicial action, you have to prove that, as a company, you have to prove that you are either unable or unwilling to come into compliance. And that leaves the agency no other choice but to seek relief from a court and have a court document drawn up, such as a consent decree. So that's kind of the latter.
So, like that clause in that warning letter now is just to smack you in the head a little harder now? I mean,
it's a little tougher language. Of course, all warning letters since 2002 are generated by the districts, the field offices, and they're reviewed by the appropriate center, and they also get concurrence by the Office of Chief Counsel in the FDA. So all parties are on board with the warning letter, and usually you don't get a second warning letter. You get one warning letter.
Okay. So on that topic, why don't we so it hits the fan, right? So let's back up. So Anthony, how am I going to get out from under this now that I got smacked in the head?
Well, I certainly would take the advice of the agency and hire a third party, and see where they can help. There should be some sort of an improvement plan in place that would be reviewed by senior management and should be supported by senior management. I think I want to take a step back though, because the warning letter may be the result of the company not really getting prepared
Absolutely.
for the inspection.
Right.
And I think I did have some comments on that. We can get to that later. But early on, 15, 20 years ago, we were having mock inspections on a regular basis. Even though we had a commercial product, we had mock inspections on a regular basis from an EU perspective as well as from an FDA perspective. And we were well prepared. Not only was the company prepared in terms of knowing where the issues were and resolving the issues, but the people, the staff, were so unfazed by a knock on the door and a 482, 482 notice of inspection being handed off. And, okay, so big deal. We've been through this. But mock inspections, though, should be taken seriously. It shouldn't be looked at as we'll go through the motions. You have to take it very seriously, from senior management all the way down to the runner or to the scribe that's actually taking notes during the mock inspection. So, getting prepared for an inspection should involve a mock inspection by a third party, or perhaps by your quality unit. They have the experience to do that. So,
okay, but where I'm at too is assuming. I think one of the things that we talked about, and it came out of the data inspection, and we outsource a lot of stuff. So how do you get your partner? How do you get them in line? I mean, what do you do? I mean,
well, that starts from an early stage, I believe. Your quality agreements or the QTAs, the quality technical agreement needs to be drafted and it needs to be put in place. The FDA's recent guidance on quality agreements is pretty specific and I think long in coming, but it's there, and I think we should all take a good look at it and read it and understand what the elements of a quality agreement should be. The roles and responsibilities of the sponsor as well as the vendor obviously are part of this quality agreement, and it demonstrates oversight of the sponsor, who has ultimate responsibility. We say, while that's our vendor actually manufactures a product, but the sponsor has ultimate responsibility. They can get a 483 just like the vendor can get a 483. It doesn't matter that you've actually outsourced your processes, your manufacturing processes to a vendor. We are still, as sponsors, we are ultimately responsible. So the quality agreement, there also should be obviously an audit plan that should be issued at the beginning of a year, signed off by senior management. There needs to be audit certifications that can be then presented to an FDA inspector if they come in and ask questions about oversight. How are you overseeing your vendors? Show me the documentation that demonstrates that you have the proper oversight of your vendors. Quality metrics, there's a whole host of other things that can go through it as well.
Yeah, I get it. To me, all right. PAIs have gone around a couple of times. There used to be an amphitheater event where you'd bring in everybody but their sister, and then they came back to we're going to have a very focused hit team with everybody else sitting in the wings. So, let's start. We'll get opinions on this one. So, Joe, who should be on this team?
Well, the primary people are going to be the people that you're going to have speak with the FDA. They're in your front room. All your subject matter experts need to be on board and capable and comfortable in speaking with a regulatory authority. One thing that I wanted to mention, though, about contract manufacturers, if you read some of the recent warning letters back to the July of 2017, you'll start to see some of the warning letters have the sponsor's name in that warning letter. So, we talk about quality agreements. At the FDA, there's two cases. The case law that holds the sponsor responsible is United States versus Dotterwake and United States versus Parfait. And in those judicial decisions, it came down to the fact that the company hired the contractor as a tool to get their job done. And they're ultimately responsible for that reason. One of the cases goes back to 1944. However, no warning letter, and I tried to do this when I was back with the agency. I tried to have a warning letter holding both parties responsible. No warning letter until 2017, July 2017, had both the sponsor and the contract manufacturers, but now there's at least a dozen I've seen since July. So you could take a look at that. Sometimes they redact the name of the parent company, and sometimes they don't.
Yeah, but there's no black box. That's where I'm at. I mean, you know, it's not like, you know, here's the sponsor, oh, and by the way, it miraculously appears someplace. You know, I get it. All right. But let's talk about, all right, so the SME, you know, I mean, the point is that we know it takes a lot of people. So point is, who should be, so they should be talking to who? The quality person, the SME, who should lead this discussion?
Well, I certainly think the quality functional group should be hosting the audit. There should be backup from regulatory affairs. There should be technical operations people, and as Joe pointed out, SMEs that should be identified. And this should all be done up front as part of the development of the PIA team. So there's a readiness team that's actually identified. A good project manager is always important because they need to have the bandwidth and the knowledge and the ability to actually move along these work streams that would also be identified. A project charter, just like any other project, should be established, knowing what the objectives are, but planning well enough in advance such that you're going to be able to, if you're having a mock inspection, which I would strongly recommend, but if you're having a mock inspection, you're going to have time for the mock inspection to be conducted, the report to be issued, a CAPA to be generated, and then responses to that CAPA, such that you have about maybe 30 to 60 days before you're actually submitting your application. So you should be declaring yourself ready. You could even call in that consultant again for just, let's see, the quality of the responses is such that it's going to pass muster. I think that that is a valuable exercise because it also allows the company, if they don't have the experience, to develop the type of responses that are going to be acceptable by the FDA.
So yeah, what I've seen too, and I'm just opening the discussion here, Mark. I'll get to you because I'm going to want your input too. But there's the quality agreement, then there is the supply agreement, but there's the ever forgotten working agreement, and I just call it that. But I think where I'm at is bureaucratically, a quality agreement doesn't give you the ability to move the minutia around that you need to put a team together and institute stuff like questionnaires. How do you do this? How do you storyboard it? You know what I mean? Like, is there another strata? I mean, the quality agreement is sort of like the global thing. It's, and it's like the warning letter. There's information. Yeah, I get that. That's serious. But that inside of that is implication of a lot of information. So how do people work out? Do they have a working agreement other than this quality agreement? How do they deal with that details?
Well, the quality agreement is that I don't see it as a financial or a legally obligating document per se, but it is an agreement amongst the sponsor and amongst the CMOs that they will conduct themselves according to the GMPs. Now, I've had some people tell me that no, it is a legally binding document because if you're actually declaring that you're going to be operating according to GMPs and you don't, the agency comes in and does an inspection and finds that you are not, then you are in violation of actually making your declaration that you're going to be adhering to the GMPs. But I think to circle back to your, I guess your central question, Russ, with regard to how do you go about, getting prepared, right. For this. Now I'm looking at it. I can look at it from two different perspectives. One, as an outsourcing, model, and one as a judicial manufacturer. So if you take it as an outsource model, you have to ensure that your critical vendors, and you have to identify who those are PII ready. How do you do that? The same way that you would get yourself ready. That is that you need to go and you need to talk to your vendors, let them understand that they need to be ready. You need to inspect their PII procedures and policies. You can also have a mock inspection that you would that you, the sponsor, would pay for, to have them go through that to see how well they do. Now, some CMOs are so experienced; they've been through this many times. They have commercial products that they manufacture, and so they have a lot of experience. But just checking on that and making sure that they're going to be ready. This one caveat: any investigations, any issues that you've had, failed batches, anything like that, should be storyboarded, so that everybody's on the same page. Anyone that's going to be in front of an inspector will be, at the same level. So level set everyone that's going to be in front of the inspector, so they understand what the details are, what the what the remediation was, and I think it'll be a lot smoother that way, with storyboards.
Mark, from your standpoint.
Yeah. So I was gonna ask a question. Based on the reorganization of the FDA, would you expect to see anybody different in the inspection team than you might have in the past? I'm used to seeing like a microbiologist, a formulation person, a facility expert.
The agency about 5 years ago switched over to the case management system. It's called CMS. It allows for real-time uploading of documents during an inspection and review by center appropriate people. So theoretically, you could have very in-depth questions coming the next day by an investigator at your facility if they, ask a subject matter expert.
So, and again, preparations from your standpoint. I mean,
Right. So I'm not thinking about preparation, but I'm thinking about afterwards, the response. And one of the big takeaways from the response would be, don't respond just to the letter of the observation, but look at what the observation might be driving at. So if the observation said, I observed a person doing this, the answer might not be, okay, we're going to retrain that person, but look at maybe why that person was performing the way they were, what other systems might be affected. Is it a bigger issue than just one person not following their SOP, things like that?
Okay, well, one of the things that always shows up, and again, we spent 45 minutes talking about it. Let's just, Joe, and this open, we're going to go through it again. And why is data security all of a sudden? Is it just is the flavor of the week or what?
It's always been in every industry. There's data security, right? And even you look at the automobile industry, look at the banking industry, the pharmaceutical industry is no different. Security of your data is of the utmost importance. And what the investigators are starting to do, this goes back to the 80s and early 90s when the generic drug scandal hit the United States and the application integrity policy was implemented by the agency. Those were times, those were bad times, and the integrity of the data submitted was scrutinized at that point. And then there was a down period until approximately the early 2000s, where a major generic drug company saw 4 or actually 6 of their laboratory supervisors indicted and go to jail for data integrity reasons. So that upped the ante as far as the agency was concerned, and from that point, as more and more foreign inspections were conducted by the agency and more data integrity issues were seen on foreign soil, many of the investigators today have gone through training on data integrity, and it would be no different than if you're, it's tax season here, if you're looking for a new accountant and you go to his office and you're wondering if you should hire him to do your tax preparation, and you see him moving papers all around and he doesn't know where to find stuff and he's so disorganized, you're not going to hire him, right? So an FDA investigator is going to go in and initially they're going to look and see if all your dates add up and all your quantities add up, and get a sense for whether there's any issues there. And if they find that you're not prepared and you don't have people comfortable and you're making the investigator nervous, I did investigations for 6 years right off the bat. After you've gone through a couple of inspections where things don't go well, you get a sense, you get an intuition. Hey, you know what? Tomorrow I'm going to come back and I'm going to scratch a little bit more at this issue. And sure enough, we call it back at the agency unwinding the ball of thread. You keep pulling that piece of thread and see where it ends up. So sometimes it ends up bad, and most of the time it ends up good. I mean, really, I've looked at hundreds of the warning letters recently posted, and when you see the template in the back of the warning letter, it says data integrity remediation plan. You can read it yourself and see what the issues are.
So there's data integrity, data security, and data lockdown. I mean, just so we're talking about data integrity. The data security then, Anthony, I mean, we're talking about your ability, once it all adds up, you got to keep it that way.
No, absolutely, and I think the systems that you have in place in your laboratory and elsewhere, your document management systems have to be, robust enough, and I say robust, validated, and restricted in terms of access. Especially now, a lot of these systems are in the cloud, and there are lots of security issues with regard to the to having data in the cloud as opposed to having it on site. But I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the compliance manual, or I should say the compliance policy manual, the FDA compliance policy manual with regard to PAIs or pre-approval inspections, one of the 3 key items is data integrity, and that's been there for a long time. I mean, it's not something that's new, but it's something that's a hot topic, and it's hot topics in inspections is something that the folks in companies should be looking at. They should be looking at 483s. They should be, well, I shouldn't say 483s, but warning letters, and seeing where all the trends are. To understand where the FDA is going, and what things that they're really concentrating on. I know that one of the inspectors, and I think there was about 5 or 7 of them that was at a sponsor that I alluded to before. His only job was data integrity. He was an expert in data integrity. He was an expert in laboratory management systems. So I mean, 5 or 7 inspectors, that's a lot. I'm sure Joe would agree. But this individual, all he did for 5 days was look at data in the laboratory.
Okay, so let's shift it a little bit. I just wanted to, and we're going to open it up to questions, because there's some specific questions we want to ask, but I think we're talking about the trends we've heard here. One of the things I still want to get out on the table, and that was one of the questions that got raised up, and this is something that we got as feedback from last. And that would be on the local district level, stuff like that, or any significant changes have we addressed? I think we've given them pretty much everything we have that's up to date, right? Okay, good. All right. So, lifecycle product management. All right. Now, everybody thinks about lifecycle management in the process standpoint. The answer is, how does that all incorporate itself in a regulated environment? How do you manage lifecycle of a product? All right, and again, just some comments. We'll start at the end there, Mark, just to see, make sure you're not sleeping. No,
I'm not an expert in lifecycle product management, so
that's fine.
Might have to go to the other gentleman.
That's okay. Who wants to take a first shot at it? You don't have to.
Well, from the regulator point of view, FDA investigators, their title is Consumer Safety Officer. They have the consumer safety, when in their mind when they go in to do an inspection. Doesn't matter if it's the beginning, middle, or end of a product, patent life. To them, if there's an issue, there was an issue in the early 2000s about QT prolongation in a product, and when that comes to surface, the investigators are going to pick up on that and look and ask for information on that, and specifically with generic drugs, when you're first to market and you have, in the New Jersey area, you're the first investigator to look at a first generic. Well, somebody a couple miles away might open, up with another application for that same generic. So you might have an investigator that did the first pre-approval inspection for that ANDA, and then a couple of months later, do the second generic inspection. So he's already seen the ins and outs of the first company. And I'm not saying that happens a lot, but sometimes that happens. So you're looking at variability in investigators coming out to your facility, and it spans the gamut from beginning students really right out of college that have gone through the 6-week FDA investigative program, all the way to pharmacists with 20 years experience coming out to your facility. So you have a big gap there.
Just then I'll leave you with this thought. I'd rather be asked a question by somebody who knows what they're talking about, because I think the most dangerous are questions asked in ignorance. Because what I invariably over-answer in that particular case. So we're gonna stick a fork in it. We're done here. So thank you very much.